On this edition of Retracing History, I'm getting the chance to visit a site I've always dreamed of coming to, and there was an event that happened here in 2003 that kind of made it impossible to enjoy the site in its original form, but through a rehabilitation project, this very historic site has been reborn. This is a site very important to railroad history, as well as, believe it or not, meteorological history. We are here today at the Kinzua Bridge State Park, once the site of the world's tallest railroad bridge. The Allegheny National Forest, the land of many uses, or so I've been told by the signs. Honestly, after making this video, I feel in the 21st century it's the land of one thing: trees. So many gosh darn trees.
As we drive through the Scottish moors, apparently.
Yeah. We're driving through the Scottish moors and now somehow in Pennsylvania.
And Pennsylvania is just Europe. So I've been told.
But in the late 19th century, the region's natural resources were being cultivated by numerous entities striving to strike it rich at the height of the United States Gilded Age. Oil, coal, and lumber were the top three cash resources in the Allegheny Forest. But the topography challenged all railroads attempting to haul these commodities to market. The familiar names like the Baltimore and Ohio and the Pennsylvania Railroad are no strangers to the region, but others vied for a slice of that sweet, sweet railroad pie. One of those upstarts was the New York, Lake Erie, and Western Coal and Railroad Company, presided over by Thomas L. Kane. Kane's backstory is going to be a video one day on the channel, but let me just list a few of his feats. Son of a U.S. District Judge in Philadelphia, a free soiler who vehemently opposed the expansion of slavery on grounds that would morally corrupt America's manifest destiny, volunteered his services to be an envoy between the United States government and Mormon refugees on numerous occasions, helped to raise the OG Bucktail Regiment for the Union Army, and is rumored to have risen from his sickbed, ride all the way to the front lines in Gettysburg just so he could take charge of that brigade at its critical hour. I hope from that sampling you understand that Kane was a bit of a madman, so imagine what happens when you put him in charge of a railroad. Kane moved to the Allegheny Forest in the 1860s, and like anyone else, desired to strike it big. The land he and many others had invested in had yielded valuable resources, but there was just one problem in getting them out: the Kinzua Creek. Now, a creek may not sound like much, but what does the water do to dirt? Well, it erodes dirt. Now, what happens when erosion occurs over hundreds of thousands of years? You get valleys. And in the case of the Kinzua Creek, you get a valley that is several hundred feet deep and over 2,000 feet wide. Now, if we're talking about the Pennsylvania or the Baltimore, Ohio, they would have simply invested in going around the valley. But the New York, Lake Erie, and Western don't have that type of capital. It was estimated it would take 6 miles to bypass the Kinzua Valley, which Kane saw as unprofitable. He instead pushed the company to bridge the valley, a feat that I'm sure raised some eyebrows at first measurements, because those measurements revealed they wouldn't just be any bridge. They would have to construct the tallest railroad bridge yet conceived. Shareholders could rest easy knowing Kane soon found the man for this job: Octave Chanute. This French-American civil engineer had made a name by designing the stockyards of Chicago and had several railroad bridges to his resume. In fact, he had designed the first permanent railroad crossing over the Missouri River in 1869. Chanute tapped the Phoenix Bridge Works to construct Kane's Bridge across the Kinzua Valley, and it would employ Phoenix columns in the design. Rather than having bulk iron and loads of support, the Phoenix Iron Company discovered a hollow cylinder held with rivets was both lighter and stronger. In total, this bridge will require 20 iron abutments anchored to 110 sandstone piers on the valley floor. Preparation began over a period of 6 months in 1881, which saw the quarrying of stone for the piers. It was on April 10, 1882, that the erection of the bridge's ironwork commenced. A gin pole was employed to raise the first tower. From there, a track was laid to facilitate a crane that fed the ironwork from the rest of the bridge into place. A 40-man crew secured the entire length of the bridge in only 94 days. Incredibly, the workers had successfully assembled over 3 million pounds of iron without needing any scaffolding. No injuries or fatalities were reported during the construction.
So, if you've ever tried to assemble something with bolts, maybe like a rocking chair, for example, don't you hate it when the bolts don't line up with the holes that the manufacturer put in? Then you're just there with either your bare hands because you can't get the wrench in there. If you get the wrench in there, it's great. Trying to tighten that up. You ever gone for that before? Just can't get the bolt to line up? Well, imagine that happening while you're building something 300 feet in the air. And that is what happened frequently during the construction and the reconstruction of the Kinzua Bridge. So these spud wrenches were used by the crews on the bridge when they had to actually they had to get the plates to line perfectly up with the bolts that they were sent. I would not like to have to realign bolts 300 feet in the air personally.
The Kinzua Bridge opened for service on August 29, 1882. It was immediately recognized as an engineering marvel, with it officially being named the tallest railroad bridge for 2 whole years. Yeah, that's the thing about being revolutionary. It means someone can copy and paste all that time and energy you put into pioneering something. And by spamming that process, you advance technology in record time. So advanced that in less than 2 decades, that innovative piece of technology is outdated. It's exactly what happened to the Kinzua Bridge. By 1900, the 3 million tons of iron were unsuited for the heavier trains of the new period. The new owners of the bridge, the Erie Railroad, devised a plan to replace iron with steel. Over a period of 4 months, a crew of 100 men fed twin trusses, called timber travelers, from either end of the bridge. The trusses would straddle free of the towers at any given time, with the tower in the middle being demolished and then reconstructed out of steel. This time, C.R. Grimm of the Elmira Bridge Company planned the reconstruction, who endured a far more hectic time than Chanute. A wildfire broke out at the foot of the viaduct, a presidential hopeful's visit, and a leak-long worker strike. For 40 cents an hour, you too could climb up and down 300 feet of metal with nothing to secure you against the winds of the Kinzua Valley.
Pommy, how do you feel about going out there and reconstructing it? You just beat the record of 94 days.
Though 50 cents was the desired rate, both parties eventually settled in the middle and resumed work. To expedite the process, it was decided to reuse the original anchor bolts, a move Grimm would later regret, and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania would suffer a terrible loss from a century later.
A humble collector was reading a placard along the trail, and it says that these interior tracks, the reason is in the event that the winds were so strong, it would push a train off of the main line. So these interior tracks were meant to catch it.
The Erie opened the newly refurbished Kinzua Bridge in September of 1900, now consisting of some 6 million pounds of steel. It was as awe-inspiring as the original. Trains were still required to respect a 5-mile speed restriction, but that didn't hinder the freight the bridge was conceived to carry. But ever since the bridge was first opened, it immediately became a tourist attraction. People from across the country and even parts of the whole world were intentionally purchasing a ticket for a ride on the Erie to get to see this behemoth of a structure. The attendance was so tremendous that for a short period of time, the Erie actually operated a train depot devoted strictly to the bridge. The fascination with this bridge was so strong in part for it being the closest thing to experiencing flight. Keep in mind that for the first 21 years of its operation, taking flight at anything other than a hot air balloon was inconceivable. The connection between the Kinzua Bridge and flight wasn't just a whim either, as Octave Chanute had gone on to devise a glider that would in turn inspire the Wright brothers to be successful in creating a heavier-than-air aircraft. There were several individuals who tried their hand at interweaving flight with the Kinzua Bridge, but in 1939, one would stand above all others.
One of the craziest stories related to this bridge, and believe me, there is a whole book's worth of content about all the outlandish stunts that people came out and committed with the Kinzua Bridge, because for people to turn the 20th century, this was like flying, being 300 feet in the air. There was very little similar to this experience in the United States of America, let alone most of the world. There are so many stories, but the one that comes to mind we found at the visitor center is about an Otto Valentine, O-D-O Valentine. He was a local pilot in the Mount Juliet, Pennsylvania area, and he decided he was going to top all the other stunts that had been tried and attempted here.
One night in 1939, two of his closest mates came here into the vicinity of the bridge, kind of make sure there wasn't any patrols around from the railroad. And then the following day, Otto Valentine flew his biplane right between the towers in the middle of the bridge. Now, he actually measured it before he did the stunt, 64 feet between each tower leg. That is very narrow in terms of planes, especially prior to the Second World War, trying to navigate in such a little slot. But he did it. There's photographic proof. Only a few people were on hand because they were trying to keep the stunt somewhat secret. But it said later in a newspaper account he would initially actually go and sign postcards that were supposed to be sold at a local gift shop that was located near the bridge. Then he got cold feet about doing that because the next day after his stunt, his superior came in and started questioning all the pilots. Did you hear about a crazy man who flew between the bridge? The railroad company wants to sue him. And Valentine did the wisest thing of, I never heard of anything like that. No, I didn't do it. And actually, he kept quiet about the stunt for essentially 70 years. It wasn't until the turn of the 21st century that we really got to hear the story. And there's a newspaper clipping, a recent one for 2017, about when 102-year-old Otto Valentine actually came here and got interviewed by Kinzua Bridge State Park, revealing his crazy stunt he did here. And yeah, that man was pulling some secondhand Lions craziness, so let me tell you.
There's more here in the visitor center about Otto Valentine. So he was born in 1914, lived till 2019. Wow. First of all, that lifespan.
Yeah.
He was just built that for man. He was. I was asking earlier if he had involvement in World War II. Kind of did. He instructed cadets for the United States, for France, and if I'm not mistaken, where I read it, also for China. So yeah, for the U.S., for English, for the French, and the Chinese, he instructed cadets throughout World War II. He would also do a similar capacity during the Korean War. He is a member of the Caterpillar Club, which I just learned is a club to recognize those lives who were saved because of the use of the parachute, as he had to bail from a disabled plane in 1945. We have over here Otto's temporary student pilot certificate. Up here. And of course, down here we have Civil Aeronautics Authority license, and we have quite the imposing figure he has, and in later life as Otto Valentine today, sometimes referred to as Count Otto von Valentine. Wow! And this is Otto showing you how you're not supposed to fly, but it's really fun to do so like this, anyways.
Trains remained steady across the Kinzua Bridge until 1959. It was by this point the Erie Railroad had gained trackage rights to run all the Baltimore and Ohio's northern subdivision, elements of which still exist as part of the Buffalo and Pittsburgh Railroad. It was a more affordable plan compared to the regular maintenance of the Kinzua Bridge, and in the wake of the Second World War, many railroads were starting to experience a slacking in freight services. The farewell excursion hosted by the Erie crossed the Viaduct on June 21st, 1959. Although the bridge would see regular service one final time on October 20th, as a wreck on the Baltimore and Ohio necessitated a bypass across the valley. A short while after, the Erie sold the Kinzua Bridge to the Gavolchek Salvage Corporation. If you're a longtime viewer of the Retracing History series, you'll recall that's the same entity that acquired the East Broadtop Railroad, the last original narrow-gauge line to survive east of the Mississippi River. Just like the ODDySEEy, the Gavolcheks were convinced that the Kinzua Bridge was too historically significant to scrap, and after much convincing from the local population, set about to find a way to protect the engineering landmark for posterity. This culminated with Pennsylvania Governor William Scranton signed into law the creation of the Kinzua Bridge State Park in 1963. I'm going to shoot from the hip as a Pennsylvania native and say this was a rather unorthodox move. From my encounters with our state parks compared to other regions of the country, the Pennsylvania state park system really isn't that focused on human history. Most historical preservation efforts by the state go through the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission, while environmental preservation is specialized by the state's Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. I'm not saying human history sites never fall into the DCNR's periphery, such as the Pine Grove Furnace. They are just not often the focus. So to have the state make a railroad bridge the centerpiece of one of its state parks is a true testament to how important the Kinzua Bridge was to not just the development of the Commonwealth, but the rest of the country. A legacy that would be recognized with the bridge being placed on the National Register of Historic Civil Engineering Landmarks in 1977. For almost 3 decades, the viaduct sat tranquilly in the middle of the beautiful Kinzua Valley, with tourists still hiking out to walk the tracks across the sky. The rest of the region's railroad infrastructure, however, wasn't doing so hot. That Baltimore and Ohio Northern sub had lost most of its customers by the early 1980s and was on the verge of abandonment. But one man saw in this crisis an opportunity. That man was Sloan Cornell, who was a pioneer in railroad tourism in the U.S. He had established one of the country's earliest steam tourist rides in Indiana County, Pennsylvania. He then later moved that operation to Adams County, where it ran out of the famed community of Gettysburg. When he had heard that over 100 miles of track was going up for abandonment in the heart of the Allegheny National Forest, he saw an opportunity to make the dream ride for both rail fans and nature enthusiasts. Cornell formed the Knox and Kane Railroad in 1982 and toyed with a few different directions for excursions. By the mid-80s, he had found a winning formula. Passengers would board in Marionville, Pennsylvania, then ride through the forest up to the communities of Kane and Mount Juliet. The highlight came at the northern end of the excursion, a chance to ride across the Kinzua Bridge, which Cornell secured with a 35 lease beginning in 1987. The consist generally featured an array of coaches painted in Knox and Kane orange, helmed by number 58, a Mikado steam locomotive that was technically not a historic piece of motive power. That's because the Knox and Kane were one of 3 tourist railroads in the U.S. to purchase brand new SY-class steam locomotives from China. Which the Chinese-American steam connection of the late 20th century, that's a story for a whole other video. That may sound like it would be a gaudy consist, but very quickly, the images of the Knox and Kane trains traversing the viaduct became iconic images of Pennsylvania railroading. It makes for a fantastic magnet on my fridge. The good times rolled into the 21st century for the Knox and Kane, but in 2002, the PADCNR called for a general inspection. Engineers came back finding sections of the Kinzua Bridge's steel infrastructure had rusted clean through and called for an immediate stop to both rail and pedestrian traffic. There was a real threat that the Kinzua Bridge had grown so weak that there would be enough lateral force to knock the whole thing onto the valley below. An emergency restoration of $10 million was put into effect, with the DCNR contracting the WM Broad Company of Ohio to conduct the necessary repairs. It appeared everyone had averted a catastrophe with the historically viable bridge, but Mother Nature had other plans. On July 21st, 2003, Broad workers, as well as state park officials, went out to the bridge for a rather human day in the restoration efforts. Around mid-afternoon, a strong line of thunderstorms developed over northwestern Pennsylvania. The superintendent sent the work crew back to their lodging earlier with the growing threat of storms. A handful of people were still near the bridge when suddenly the winds picked up, trees began to fall, and rain pummeled the Kinzua Valley. Loud booms were heard as the storm swept west to east. Then there was an eerie silence. When the work crew and park staff came out from where they were seeking shelter, they quickly discovered what had caused the bangs. 11 of the Kinzua Bridge's 20 steel towers were now resting on the valley floor. It was later determined that an F1 tornado with winds up to 90 miles per hour had touched down a mile west of the bridge. The valley funneled it straight into the bridge, and when that happened, 2 of the tallest towers were pried from their anchors before being thrown down on their western side. 6 more towers met a similar fate in a delayed sequence before southern winds blew 3 additional towers over. Incredibly, nobody was killed or injured by the collapse or the tornado itself. Home Collector also just noted me, incredibly, for all this twisted steel, there's no real signs of any of the rivets actually popping. The true collapse of the bridge really had nothing to do with most of its design. The reconstruction was almost flawless. The one problem being that they did not replace the original iron bolts mooring the bridge into the piers. In 30 seconds, the 121 years of history had appeared to have been erased. To bring the bridge back to operation, the $10 million restoration would have to turn into a $45 million reconstruction, something that was financially out of the equation. The Knox and Kane Railroad would ultimately be the biggest casualty of this tornado, as not having the awe-inspiring bridge as part of their excursions led to a 75% drop in ridership. By 2006, facing a lack of riders and freight opportunities, operations were suspended. Any hope of revitalizing the operation were dashed by an arson fire at the railroad's Kane facilities 2 years later, damaging 2 steam locomotives, a diesel, and additional rolling stock. Ironically enough, it would be the Kovalchuk Corporation that would buy the rights to the Knox and Kane, who oversaw scrapping operations of the entire line throughout the 2010s.
Oh yeah, definitely Knox and Kane. You can barely make out a trestle back there.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, you can. I'm not looking, because I'm driving.
I believe you'll see it in the replay,
Yeah.
and you'll be very amazed.
Wow, that's an amazing trestle.
I'm glad you're amazed by it.
I really am. It's spectacular.
So what of Kinzua Bridge State Park? What would be the point of retaining the park with most of its chief attraction toppled? Well, most of it. 624 feet of the bridge's southern end had survived the tornado, towering 225 feet over the valley floor. Its collapse continued to draw visitors who were curious to see tornado damage up close. Remember, it's Pennsylvania. It's not a state associated with tornadoes, although it does average 16 a year. And nothing was going to stop those darn leaf watchers from getting an unobstructed view of the Allegheny National Forest fall foliage. Sensing an educational opportunity and wanted to stabilize the region's economy, the decision was made by the state to convert the surviving bridge span into a skywalk, a conversion that would cost $4 million to achieve. Judging by the hundreds of people you've seen throughout this video during our visit in October of 2024, I'd say it was worthwhile investment. It was also decided during this reinvention to significantly upgrade park accommodations, including an 11,000 square foot visitor center. And believe me, we spent like a good solid hour in this visitor center toying with all the interactive exhibits. I especially love this flip book, which you could keep turning a dial on and would actually show kind of almost like in stop motion images of the bridge being built. And of course, its unfortunate collapse. You can also go for this case where they had all sorts of myths and legends about the bridge with these really cool cartoon images to really describe it. I've never really seen cartoons being used, like the cartoon images being used to be the museum exhibit. Really innovative idea. And they also sell them on postcards and gift shop. Picked one of each up. They even got surprisingly a lot of information about Bigfoot. I wasn't expecting to encounter Bigfoot at the Kinzua Bridge State Park, but he's everywhere. Bigfoot's everywhere.
These penny pressers are becoming harder and harder to come by. They do have 4 different combinations here at Kinzua Bridge State Park. I could have been the uptight historian and got one of the skywalk or the bridge, or that's not a bridge, that's a train, Spencer. But nah, I'm not gonna be uptight. I'm gonna get the Bigfoot one. Oh yeah, I got the Bigfoot one. Why not?
With its interactive exhibits and hiking trails, the park educates the public on the impact industries, engineering, and the force of nature have upon the environment that humans inhabit.
Holy shit.
I'm not gonna deny, even I, for heights, I'm having one of them trippy moments. It's actually not as bad standing right over it, but if you're on the side, oh, that's I don't know why. For some reason, stand on the side, that's where you get the wobbly feeling. Hey, look, there's peanuts down there. Oh, those are human beings. Oh, wow, we're really up here.
Whoa! I saw the front. Let's go see it close up.
All right, we're going to try and attempt to get down to the bottom of the valley so we get up close with other parts of the bridge. Because the good news is the bridge is all here. The bad news is about most of it's sitting on the valley floor.
the signs at Kinzua Bridge State Park. Highly confusing. So we're just going the path of least resistance. Down. Very down. We are going down. We are going down into the valley.
So you know that means to get back up, you're just going to be there.
Well, we can, if there's a scenic path. Humble collectors not like me saying scenic right now.
Yeah, because scenic implies long.
So this steel plates, all riveted. Don't you want to work for 40 cents an hour, riveting all them plates in?
No.
Don't worry, they negotiated. They got to 45. You never know what's gonna happen when you retrace history. I think this is some type of well, possibly an oil well or a gas well. I think actually maybe an oil well, considering the region we're in. Pennsylvania was actually the birthplace of America's oil industry in the mid-19th century. Where else in the United States is it safe to walk through and visit tornado debris on a regular basis? That's something Kinzua State Park can now claim to. Kinzua Bridge State Park. I got to remember to say Kinzua Bridge. There's also Kinzua Dam State Park.
Copy.
It's very complicated here in Pennsylvania. All right, I've dragged Humble Collector all the way down here to do one thing. We're going to poke the debris.
Yep.
All right, we did that. Time to go back up that.
Time to climb that.
Yep, we did it. Was it worth it?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm having second thoughts about that whole, let's get to the bottom of the valley. We'll film all that debris. It'll be cool footage. Woo! You know, the thought just occurred to me that that tower is about 230 feet up in the air. And if I'm not mistaken, the 9 miners at the Q Creek mine in 2002 were trapped approximately 230 feet underground. So now I get to walk every foot approximately that the drilling crews had to bore through to rescue the 9 miners at Q Creek. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to our episode of Retracing History about it. Why did my brain decide to go to that at a moment like this?
I was actually wondering that, yeah.
Delirium.
I was like, it
Content creating delirium.
really out of nowhere. I don't like that,
I hear the wind rustling against the bridge, and I don't know how I like it. I don't.
well, I think it's got to be that window washer platform, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Cool, man.
still don't like it.
That's going to wrap up our exploration of the Kinzua Bridge. If you want to go see this historic site yourself, well, I got some bad news. Part of the urgency for me and a humble collector going to go out to see the Skywalk is that the Skywalk and its corresponding trails are going to be shut down for a 2-year restoration beginning in November of 2024. So if you're watching this between 2024 and 2026, and this hasn't satisfied your Kinzua Bridge fix, I got a few suggestions. First up, I recommend The Fall of the Eighth Wonder of the World by Scott's ODDYSEEy, which provides a comprehensive overview of the bridge's engineering and mythology. I'm also a longtime fan of Scott's stuff, who explores the odd and weird stories of who we once were. If you want to learn more about the Sloan Cornell era of the bridge, History in the Dark's Sad Tale of the Knox and Kane Railroad does a great job highlighting the rise and fall of that colorful short line. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button down below. If you want to follow us in our future adventures, consider subscribing here to Readout Productions. If you want to go the extra mile in supporting us, there is our Ko-fi page, links in the description below, where you have the option to join our Garrison, our membership program, which for a small monthly fee will give you access to select scripts, digital postcards, and a few other behind-the-scenes features from us here at Readout Productions. All right, thank you guys for watching. Actually, I'm not out of coffee yet. Okay, now I'm out of coffee, so yeah. I'm out of coffee. Video's done. Thank you guys for watching. See you next time.